Locks come in different shapes and sizes, but the principle of using them is pretty much the same. A lock is simply a chamber with gates to contain the water at either end. Crossing the lock gate, people need to be aware of the dangers of slips, trips and falls, and hold onto the safety rail at all times. Sluices, called paddles, which are operated using a windlass, control the flow of water in and out of a lock. Ground paddles open chambers that allow water to pour in and out of the lock. Gate paddles are mounted on the lock gates. There are different types of paddles on the Canal network, but they all have a similar function of flooding or draining the lock. Paddle catches help to control the paddle when raising and lowering. These vary in type, and you will get specific training on the paddle catches you will be using from your team leader. Some locks have anti-vandal devices, which you release with a key. Make sure your windlass fits correctly. An ill-fitting windlass will damage the spindle and can be very dangerous. Never leave a windlass unattended and always take great care when using them. Spinning or flying windlasses can cause serious injury. Always wear your blue and white livery, CRT sweatshirts or polo shirts, as this shows you're part of the team. The remainder of your clothing will be dependent on the weather, so please bring appropriate clothing, i.e. rainwear or sun hat. Your CRT name badge would be useful to wear, as our boaters appreciate the personal touch. Trust staff and volunteers are expected to wear life jackets whilst on duty, for the safety benefit firstly, but also to indicate to the public you are a properly trained member of the CRT team. On-site training will be given on how to wear your life jackets. This will include checking that it's in full working order, safe and ready to wear. When approaching a lock, you may need to tie up in order to let other boats through. Approach the bank slowly and secure the boat fore and aft. Always take a turn around the bollard if possible. Once the forward rope is attached, you can adjust the boat accordingly. When you've checked that the lock is clear to use and that all paddles are down, raise the upper ground paddles. Take your time, as this can be a physical job. The lock will begin to fill. You should stay by the paddle mechanism whilst the lock fills in case there is a problem and you need to close the paddles quickly. Some locks will have gate paddles as well as ground paddles. Don't open these until they are underwater, otherwise you risk flooding boats coming upstream. When the water in the lock reaches the same level as the water upstream in the canal, the gates are ready to be opened. Always check for obstructions in the recess where the gates will rest when open. Using the technique shown, open the gates. It's important that the helmsman stays with the boat at all times when entering and leaving a lock with the engine running, and that any fenders are brought inboard before entering the lock. The ground paddles at the top of the lock must now be lowered, ensuring the paddle catches are placed back in the operating position. Then continue to shut the lock gates. The stern of the boat must be kept beyond the sill marker when in the lock. It may be necessary for the helmsman to engage forward gear to keep the boat away. With the boat securely in the lock, it's time to drain the lock using the lower gate paddles. This clip clearly shows that the paddle catch has not been placed back in the operating position as it should have been. Engage the paddle catch and raise the paddles. Boats tend to bang around when water flows in and out of a lock, so stay alert. Using a centre rope around a bollard will help steady the craft, but please try to avoid tying them to the handrails whenever possible, as shown, as they are not designed for this and often damage them. When the water has drained out of the lock and the level is the same as that downstream, the gates are ready to be opened. Leave the lock slowly so bumps are less likely to cause damage. Once the boat is clear, close the paddles Check to see if any other craft are waiting to enter the lock. If not, close the gates so that the lock is ready for the next user. The principle for using a single lock is the same, however only one boat may enter at a time. Ensure all paddles are down and that the helmsman stays in control of the boat and enters the lock slowly. With the lower gate and paddles shut, open the upper ground paddles and the lock will fill. The flow of water into the lock causes the boat to move. This is why the helmsman must always be on the tiller. With the lock full, the gate is ready to be opened using the correct technique. This way of opening and shutting gates minimises manual handling injuries. You're not expected to operate locks for members of the public, but there may be occasions when assistance is required. It is, however, a duty of CRT lockkeepers to always be polite and courteous to the public. Once the boat is clear of the lock, close the gate and lower the ground paddles. With a staircase of locks, or flight, the top gate of one lock is the bottom gate of another. Before entering a flight, check that there are no other boats in the flight. If there are, it's normally necessary for them to clear the flight before entering. Make sure all paddles are down. If you are going uphill, the bottom locks should be empty, with the upper locks all full. You use the water from the upper locks to fill the lower ones in turn, raising you up the flight. When you are going downhill, the top lock should be full with the lower ones empty. You empty the upper lock into the lower ones in turn. This flight at Foxton uses ponds to the side of the locks to fill and empty the water into the next lock in the flight. The red ground paddle, when raised, floods the lock using water from the upper pond. The white ground paddle drains the water in the lock into the pond below. You will have a comprehensive induction into the workings of your particular flight should you work on one. Lockkeepers often work alone. There are different lone working procedures on different sites, and your local supervisor will clarify which one they use. If you come across either a needle or syringe, where possible, try to cover it with a piece of board or bucket. Make sure other colleagues on site are aware of its location. Ensure other people avoid going near it. Report it to your line manager immediately. Do not touch it. A trained person should remove it using a sharps box and other safety equipment. You are not expected to wear steel toe-capped footwear for this role, but sturdy footwear with proper ankle support, for example walking boots, should be used. Absolutely no flip-flops or deck shoes. Please ensure that your laces are tied tightly and that there's no loose clothing, as these things could cause slips, trips or falls. A significant risk in a lock environment is falls from height, so be aware of yourself and surroundings when pounds are empty, as falls can cause severe injury. Some welfare and operational buildings may have asbestos due to age. Beware of any warning information and follow instructions. Take note. Do not move or disturb it in any way. If in doubt, stay out and consult a member of CRT staff for further advice. Asbestos is inert if not disturbed. Please be aware of the need to look after your own safety at all times. This includes driving to and from site. Your general duties should not include manual handling. However, if you are undertaking other tasks which involve manual handling, then a further risk assessment needs to be carried out. On these occasions, you would need steel toe-capped footwear and make yourself aware of manual handling techniques. for example, bending your knees when picking up an item. If you are likely to come into contact with hazardous substances, including paint, you will have to familiarise yourself with the video Safe Use of Hazardous Substances. COSH sheets are available from your team leader or online for all approved products that the Trust uses. If you come across a situation serious enough that you believe first aid is required, then do not hesitate to call the emergency services on 112 from your mobile phone. Remember to inform your team leader of the incident. Your local induction will have stressed the fact that lock keepers are not expected to provide supervision to members of the public, including boaters. Please limit yourself to providing assistance and advice to people who request it. However, on occasion, you may unfortunately come into contact with unsafe behaviour, including verbal and physical abuse. The Trust recommends to all staff and volunteers that in these instances, remove yourself from sight if the situation does not calm down. Again, report any incident to your team leader. Guidance for boaters on safe operations of the different bridges and locks, maintenance of their boats, etc., can all be found in the Boater's Handbook DVD. So, if you find someone who is struggling, suggest that they view it online or obtain a copy from the Trust. The Trust has a duty of care for all employees and volunteers, and we take this responsibility very seriously. Thank you for volunteering with Canal and River Trust. We wish you a safe, rewarding and enjoyable experience.